Distance has never been the greatest obstacle. It is the terrain that turns the journey to these villages into a real challenge. Some stand on towering cliffs. Others sit on islands surrounded by the open ocean, or beneath snow-covered mountains along rugged coastlines. These are places where communities have lived for generations. To reach them, you may have to cross the sea by boat, climb stairways attached to steep mountainsides, or spend hours traveling across snow and ice. Yet these are not routes built for explorers. They are the paths local people take to return home, carry food, and sustain everyday life. And every one of these places is proof that people will always find a way to live in landscapes that seem almost impossible to reach. Gásadalur lies on the western edge of the Faroe Islands. It is a very small village. Only a handful of houses sit between towering mountains and the North Atlantic Ocean. Ahead are steep cliffs. Below are powerful waves. Right beside the village, Monemvasia waterfall plunges straight into the sea. For generations, there was almost no easy way to reach this place. Before 2004, Gásadalur had no road for cars. To leave the village, residents had to hike over a high mountain pass or travel by boat when the weather allowed. That affected every part of daily life. Mail, supplies, going to school, and medical care all depended on the mountain trail and the sea. It was not until the mountain tunnel opened that Gásadalur was finally connected to the rest of the island. Even today, its location shows why it was once considered one of the most inaccessible villages in the Faroe Islands. Civita di Bagnoregio stands on top of a massive rock plateau, surrounded by deeply eroded valleys in central Italy. Rain, wind, and earthquakes have worn away the ground beneath it for centuries. The land supporting the village has become narrower over time. Steep cliffs continue to collapse little by little. Today, there is only one way to enter Civita. You have to walk across the bridge, connecting the village to the outside world. It is the only entrance. In the past, reaching the village was even more difficult. as landslides and unstable terrain frequently damage the access routes. The erosion has never stopped. Parts of the rock plateau have already disappeared over time. Even so, people still live in Civita. Its stone houses, narrow streets, and small piazza continue to be part of everyday life. In Koh Panyee, solid ground almost does not exist. The entire village stands on wooden stilts driven into the shallow waters of Phang Nga Bay. There are shops, homes, and everything needed for daily life. Every part of the village is connected by narrow walkways. Even the soccer field floats above the water. The village is surrounded by the sea and towering limestone cliffs. There are no roads connecting Koh Panyee to the mainland. Every journey in or out of the village is made by boat. Visitors can also reach it only by boat. It is the primary means of transportation for almost every aspect of daily life. More than 200 years ago, a fishing community chose this place to settle. Whenever they needed more space, they simply expanded the village farther out over the water. Generation after generation, Koh Panyee grew into a community of thousands. Even though beneath their feet there is still nothing but the sea. Castellfollit de la Roca has only a narrow strip of land to build on. That strip sits atop a basalt cliff more than 50 meters high and stretches for nearly 1 kilometer. In some places, the land is only a few dozen meters wide. The houses stand one after another along the edge of the cliff. The streets are only wide enough for people to pass through. The village has almost no room to expand. Every building must adapt to the limited rock beneath it. Only one main road connects Castellfollit to the outside world. The rest of the village is surrounded by sheer cliffs and 2 rivers flowing below. People have lived on this rocky plateau since the Middle Ages. Generation after generation, life has continued on this narrow strip of land formed by volcanic lava hundreds of thousands of years ago. To reach Wae Rebo, you must begin with a forest trail. The path stretches for about 7 kilometers, climbing steadily through the mountains of Flores Island. Many sections are continuously steep. Only after several hours of hiking does the village emerge through the clouds and mist. Hidden at an elevation of nearly 1,200 meters deep in the mountains, Wae Rebo is an isolated settlement made up of just 7 traditional cone-shaped houses. Ancient forest surrounds the village. There are no neighboring settlements nearby. Fewer than 200 people live here, completely separated from the power grid and modern transportation. No road leads into the village. Food and many daily necessities still have to be carried along the mountain trail. Even so, the villagers have maintained life here for more than a century. Making Wae Rebo one of the most isolated villages in Indonesia. Supai lies at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. To reach the village, you must leave the canyon rim and descend nearly 1,000 meters in elevation. The trail is about 13 kilometers long. Red rock lines both sides of the path. The farther you go, the narrower the canyon walls become. It takes several hours before you finally arrive in Supai. Most residents travel on foot, by horseback, or by mule. Helicopters are also used, but only under certain conditions. Every time they leave the village, they must climb the same route that brought them down into the canyon. Supai is home to only a few hundred people. Even though it lies within one of the world's most famous canyons, the community continues to live in relative isolation from the outside world. On a steep mountainside in northern Iran, the streets are not separated from the houses, as they are in most places. This is Masouleh. Most homes are built from local wood, stone, and clay to adapt to the mountain climate. Because of the steep terrain, the roof of one house becomes the courtyard for the house above it. At the same time, it serves as a public walkway through the village. The entire village is built in terraces along the mountainside. Stairways, narrow alleys, and courtyards connect the rows of houses into a network of pedestrian paths. To reach the next neighborhood, you often have to walk across someone else's rooftop. Vehicles stop outside the village. The rest of Masouleh is reserved entirely for pedestrians. This unique layout has existed for centuries. The terrain itself shaped a system of pathways unlike those found in ordinary villages. In Ganvié, the water serves as the streets. More than 20,000 people live on Lake Nokoué in Benin. Thousands of homes stand on wooden stilts. There are no paved roads or familiar intersections between neighborhoods, only waterways stretching across the lake. Here, wooden canoes are used for almost every part of daily life. People paddle to the market. Shops and floating markets also operate directly on the water. This community has existed for more than 4 centuries. The Tofinu people originally settled here to escape slave raids because, according to local beliefs, their pursuers were forbidden from entering the lake. Since then, Ganvié has grown into one of Africa's largest floating communities, where the water remains the only route connecting every home. The path to Atule'er is built directly into the cliff face. In the past, villagers climbed using tree trunks tied together with rattan vines. Today, those ladders have been replaced by a steel staircase. Even so, the journey still requires climbing more than 2,500 steps to reach an elevation of about 800 meters. Some sections are almost vertical. People have to grip the handrails with both hands and climb one step at a time. The entire ascent usually takes nearly an hour. Only a few dozen families live in Atule'er. For many years, this was the village's only connection to the world below. Every time residents left home or returned, they had to climb the entire route. Travel is much safer today than it once was. But the terrain has hardly changed. Those thousands of steps remain an inseparable part of everyday life in Atule'er. In the semi-desert of southern Tunisia, many homes are almost impossible to spot. Only when you get closer do circular pits, dozens of meters wide, begin to appear. They are the entrances to Matmata. Instead of building on the surface, the residents dug their homes underground. At the center is an open courtyard. The living rooms are carved into the earthen walls surrounding it. Bedrooms, storage rooms, everything lies below ground. To enter a home, you first descend into the central courtyard. Then continue through short tunnels connecting the different rooms. This design helps reduce the daytime heat. It also keeps the interior temperature more stable after sunset. Every aspect of daily life takes place underground. To this day, many families in Matmata still live in these underground homes, preserving a way of adapting to the desert that has endured for centuries. Deep in Georgia's Caucasus Mountains, Ushguli is one of the highest continuously inhabited communities in Europe. More than 30 medieval stone towers stand among the village's stone houses. They once served as defensive towers and shelters during times of conflict. In summer, you can still drive to Ushguli from Mestia. The distance is only about 45 kilometers, but the trip often takes more than 2 hours because of the narrow, rough mountain road. It is also the village's only connection to the outside world. From around November to April, heavy snow regularly covers this route. Snowstorms can cut off access for days and sometimes even weeks. In Ushguli, reaching the village is often not determined by distance. It depends on whether the road is still passable. An island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Only 2 ways to get here: by ship or by helicopter. But neither is available all the time. Rough seas can prevent ships from reaching the harbor. Bad weather can also ground the helicopter. Aogashima lies about 360 kilometers from Tokyo. At the center of the island is a large volcanic crater. Inside it sits a smaller volcanic crater. Amid this landscape, nearly 200 people live here year-round. It is one of the very few communities in the world that still exists inside an active volcano. At times, access to the island has to be suspended completely. As a result, reaching Aogashima always depends more on natural conditions than on any schedule. Rice terraces blanket the entire mountainside. They climb from the valley floor all the way to the edge of the forest. Nestled among those terraces is Batad, a village with almost no flat ground. The houses are built directly into the steep slopes. The road for cars ends before reaching the village. Beyond that, there are only stone steps, narrow trails, and the edges of the rice terraces. To reach Batad, you have to hike along the mountainside before descending into the heart of the terraces. These fields still sustain the entire community. In Batad, the terraces are more than farmland. They also shape the way people travel and stay connected to the village. Bonifacio is unlike most coastal towns. Its entire old town stands on a limestone cliff about 70 meters above the sea at the southern tip of Corsica. Stone houses are built right along the edge of the cliff, creating the impression that they are suspended above the Mediterranean. The harbor lies at the base of the cliffs. There, the road winds up the hillside to the town gate. Inside the fortified walls, however, most movement takes place on foot. Narrow passageways weave between rows of closely packed stone buildings. To explore the base of the cliffs, you must follow trails carved directly into the limestone. One side is covered by the overhanging rock face. The other drops straight to the sea below. Some sections are only about 1 to 2 meters wide. The towering cliffs once made Bonifacio much easier to defend against attacks from the sea. Even today, the terrain continues to shape the way people enter and move through the town. Ittoqqortoormiit lies on the eastern coast of Greenland. It is one of the most isolated communities in the Western Hemisphere. The village is surrounded by the Arctic Ocean, deep fjords, and hundreds of kilometers of frozen wilderness. The nearest community is still far away. There is no road connecting this place to the rest of Greenland. For about 9 months of the year, the sea is frozen. During that time, the ice becomes the main route for snowmobiles and dog sleds. Summer brings the gradual breakup of the sea ice. Supplies can be delivered only during a short window when ships are able to reach the harbor through the ice. if sea conditions change, every plan may have to be postponed. The residents still depend on hunting to support their way of life. In Ittoqqortoormiit, staying connected to the outside world has never been part of everyday life. It has always depended on the ice, the sea, and a very short summer. That is what makes this one of the hardest villages on Earth to reach. The first thing you notice in Monemvasia is not the town. It is a massive rock rising from the sea. The entire settlement is hidden behind this enormous rock. From the mainland, it is difficult to realize that people still live there. A narrow causeway provides the only connection to the mainland. Once you pass through the town gate, vehicles can go no farther. Ahead are stone-paved alleyways winding along the hillside and between rows of historic buildings. Stairways connect one part of the town to another. Every journey through the old town is made on foot. The rock, rising more than 100 meters above the sea, once made Monemvasia a natural fortress. Access from both the mainland and the sea was extremely limited. Even today, that layout remains almost unchanged. To explore the old town, you still have to enter through its single gateway and continue on foot through the maze of stone alleyways that have existed for centuries. It takes only a few minutes to walk across Santa Cruz del Islote. The island covers just about 1 hectare, yet more than 1,000 people live here. Houses stand wall to wall. There is almost no open space left. There are no cars, no motorcycles. The alleyways are only wide enough for a few people to pass each other. The houses are built so closely together that many walls nearly share the same boundary. Whenever more space is needed, residents continue expanding the island into the sea with rock, coral, and fill. The island has no natural source of fresh water. Most drinking water and many daily necessities are brought in by boat from the mainland. Every trip depends on the condition of the sea. Even though it is only about the size of a few soccer fields, Santa Cruz del Islote remains home to a densely populated community in the middle of the Caribbean Sea. The air in Komic is much thinner than at lower elevations. The village sits at about 4,500 meters in India's Spiti Valley. It is one of the highest permanently inhabited communities in the world. Rocky mountains, a cold desert plateau, and barren slopes stretch in every direction. The road to Komic crosses several Himalayan mountain passes. During winter, heavy snow can restrict access for long periods. Even in the best season, the altitude, cold winds, and harsh landscape make the journey far from easy. Only a small community lives here year-round. Houses are scattered across the high plateau. Tang Yud Monastery stands on the mountainside as the village's most recognizable landmark. At this elevation, reaching Komic depends on more than the road. It also depends on how well your body can adapt to the thin air and the harsh conditions of Spiti. The pointed rock formations in Kandovan are more than part of the landscape. They are people's homes. Hundreds of cone-shaped rock towers were formed from volcanic ash and rock. After eruptions of Mount Sahand tens of thousands of years ago. Over generations, the residents carved directly into these formations. Little by little, living spaces were created from the solid rock itself. Bedrooms, kitchens, storage rooms, and even stairways are all inside. Each home can have multiple levels. The floors are connected by narrow passageways and stone steps winding along the hillside. Vehicles can reach only certain parts of the village. Beyond that, travel continues on steep paths between the rock formations. A few hundred people still live in Kandovan throughout the year. The thick rock walls help retain heat during winter. In summer, they keep the interiors much cooler. Even today, Kandovan remains one of the very few places in the world where an entire community continues to live inside naturally formed volcanic rock. In Laya, many supplies are still transported by yak. Not because the villagers want to preserve an old way of life, but because it remains the most practical way to cross the mountainous terrain. The village sits at an elevation of nearly 3,800 meters, deep in the mountains of northern Bhutan. Everyday goods still have to travel along mountain trails to reach the village. On many sections of the route, yaks remain more effective than motor vehicles. Stone and wooden houses are scattered across the high mountain meadows. The Laya people continue to herd yaks and move between seasonal grazing grounds. Although transportation has improved over the years, bringing people and supplies to Laya still takes much longer than it does in most other communities in Bhutan. The rugged terrain of the Himalayas continues to shape the rhythm of life in this mountain village. Wooden houses rise above the waters of Colombia's Ciénaga Grande de Santa Marta Lagoon. Nueva Venecia lies deep within this vast wetland. From the mainland, reaching the village usually takes more than an hour by boat, passing through narrow channels and mangrove forests. The houses are built on wooden stilts. Boats are moored in front of many homes. Narrow canals serve as the village's streets. They connect the residential areas with the school, the church, and the market. Daily life takes place on the water. The entire community depends on this network of canals every day. In 2000, a massacre forced most of the residents to leave. A few years later, many families returned. They rebuilt their homes on the original wooden stilts and resumed fishing as their main livelihood. Nueva Venecia continues to exist in the middle of the wetlands, where boats remain the only way to travel in and out and connect every part of the village. The cold rarely leaves La Rinconada. Temperatures regularly fall below 0 degrees Celsius. The city sits at an elevation of more than 5,100 meters in the Peruvian Andes. The air contains only about half the oxygen found at sea level. Even walking a short distance can leave many people out of breath. The road to La Rinconada winds across several mountain passes before reaching the settlement. Houses cover the mountainside below the Ananea Glacier. Electricity, clean water, and many basic services remain limited. There is no airport. Access to the outside world depends mainly on a mountain road that takes many hours from the lower elevations. Even so, tens of thousands of people continue to live here. Most come in search of work at the gold mine beside the settlement. La Rinconada is not a place that is easy to reach. And even after you arrive, the harsh natural conditions remain part of everyday life. Tagia is tucked deep within the limestone canyons of Morocco's High Atlas Mountains. Towering cliffs, hundreds of meters high, surround the village on multiple sides. Below them, only a narrow strip of land remains for homes and farmland. The journey to Tagia ends with a hike through the canyon. From the village, several trails continue along the cliff faces toward the deeper parts of the valley. Some sections consist of simple wooden bridges made from tree trunks and anchored directly to the rock. In other places, people have to use their hands to climb across steep rock slabs and narrow gaps in the canyon. A few hundred Berber people still live in Tagia. The landscape has changed very little over time. As a result, Tagia remains one of the few communities where every journey in or out is still shaped by the canyons and towering cliffs of the high Atlas Mountains. In Muran, you will not see cars driving through the streets. The village sits on a cliff about 1,650 meters above Switzerland's Lauterbrunnen Valley. The narrow streets are reserved for pedestrians. Local electric vehicles and maintenance vehicles are among the few exceptions. The village depends on cable cars and a mountain railway for its connection to the outside world. Building materials, heating fuel, supplies, and other heavy goods all arrive through these transport routes. As a result, the station is more than a place for passengers. It is also a vital supply hub for the entire community. In winter, thick snow covers the wooden rooftops. When bad weather forces the cable cars to stop operating, daily life quickly contracts around the transportation routes that remain available. Muran is not remote because of wilderness. It is difficult to reach because the entire village still exists outside the normal road network. Turning off your car in winter can mean you will not be able to start it again for hours. That is a normal part of life in Oymyakon. Temperatures here have dropped to about -71.2 degrees Celsius, the lowest ever recorded in a permanently inhabited community. The ground remains frozen year-round. Winter lasts for 7 or even 8 months. The extreme cold makes every outdoor task slower and more difficult. Growing vegetables is almost impossible. Daily food supplies rely mainly on meat, fish, and goods brought in from outside. Oymyakon lies deep within Russia's Yakutia region. When snowstorms arrive, connections with nearby areas can be disrupted for long periods. Even so, hundreds of people continue to live here. Oymyakon remains proof that a community can survive even in the coldest inhabited place on Earth. A steep rocky mesa rises above the surrounding valley. On its flat summit, only a few hundred meters across, sits Amedi, a town that has existed for more than 3,000 years in the Kurdistan region of northern Iraq. The rock plateau rises about 300 to 400 meters above the surrounding landscape. Rows of houses stand close to the cliff edge. From many points, the rock face drops almost straight down into the valley below. To reach Amedi, the road climbs gradually to the top of the plateau. The ascent is not long, but the change in elevation is unmistakable. One side is bordered by solid rock, the other opens to the valley below. Once you arrive, the space immediately becomes much more confined. Homes and public buildings all share the limited flat ground on the summit. Amedi has very little room to expand. The cliffs surrounding the town form a natural boundary. It is that limitation that has compressed the entire settlement onto a small plateau high above the land around it. The paved road ends before reaching Vanaza. From that point on, luggage and every journey continue along stone-paved walkways. The village is almost entirely free of cars. A small railway station, set between two tunnels through the mountains, serves as the main gateway for both residents and visitors. Vanaza is tucked into a narrow valley in Italy's Cinque Terre. Steep hillsides surround it on three sides. The fourth opens onto the Mediterranean through a small, naturally sheltered harbor. Colorful houses rise in terraces from the waterfront up the hillside. Stone alleyways weave between the buildings before connecting to stairways that climb higher. There is very little flat land. Homes, shops, and small cafes are packed into the narrow space between the mountains and the sea. Daily life unfolds along a network of stone lanes that has existed for centuries. That is why Vanaza has preserved the layout of a historic seaside village almost unchanged. The terrain has done more than limit its expansion. It has also shaped the way people reach the village and live there to this day. Little Diomede is little more than a rocky island rising from the middle of the Bering Strait. There is no large harbor along its shoreline, only a rocky beach where aluminum boats are pulled completely ashore. After every trip. Just beyond it are fuel storage tanks and a small settlement built into the rocky hillside. Wooden stairways and walkways connect homes at different elevations, replacing a conventional street system. The island has no airport. When people, mail, or supplies need to arrive, helicopters become the most important form of transportation. But flights do not operate on a regular schedule. Strong winds, fog, snowstorms, and sea ice can delay or cancel them at any time. During winter, the sea remains frozen for months. Boats can travel only when conditions allow. More than 80 people still live here, on an island where every connection to the outside world depends on the right weather, the right season, and the right means of transportation. In Nongriat, the bridges are not built from concrete or steel. They are made from the living roots of Indian rubber trees. Over many decades, the Khasi people guide the growing roots until they weave together, forming bridges strong enough for an entire community to use every day. The village lies deep within the rainforests of India's Meghalaya state. More than 3,000 stone steps provide the main connection to the outside world. Living root bridges, suspension bridges, and stone paths link Nongriat with the surrounding area. These are also the routes people use to go to school, carry supplies, and return home. Heavy rain falls throughout much of the year. Streams and waterfalls often rise quickly after major storms. As a result, the living root bridges continue to play a vital role in connecting the village. In Nongriat, they are more than an extraordinary form of engineering. They remain an essential part of everyday life in the rainforests of Meghalaya. Sheer cliffs surround almost the entire island of Pitcairn. Only Bounty Bay forms an opening large enough for boats to approach. Just above this small bay sits Adamstown, the island's only settlement. Only about 40 people live here. The houses are scattered across the hillsides overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Pitcairn has no airport. It also has no deep-water harbour for large ships. Supply vessels must anchor offshore. People and cargo are transferred to the island by longboats before reaching the small landing at Bounty Bay. Rough seas can halt unloading operations until conditions become safe again. Supply ships do not arrive every day. As a result, residents plan and organize many parts of their lives around the arrival of each shipment. That has become the familiar rhythm of life for this small community in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Lamayuru is built across multiple levels of a mountainside at an elevation of more than 3,500 meters in Ladakh. Layers of eroded earth divide the landscape into countless ridges and steep gullies. Homes are built wherever small patches of land remain. The highway connecting Leh and Kargil passes below the village, but from the road, travel continues on steep paths, stone steps, and narrow alleyways leading to different clusters of houses. Lamayuru Monastery stands at the highest point. Every day, residents walk up and down the slopes to carry out daily life, work, and move between homes at different elevations. Flat ground is extremely limited. Building space is also scarce. As a result, Lamayuru developed in terraces along the mountainside instead of expanding into the valley. The dry climate means trees and farmland exist only where water is available. Small fields are scattered among the slopes. Most homes are built from local stone and earth. After many centuries, the layout of Lamayuru has remained largely unchanged, shaped by the distinctive terrain and climate of Ladakh. Hotuan stretches across the hillside of Shengshan Island, off the coast of China's Zhejiang province. The houses are built at different elevations. Today, most of their walls and tiled roofs are covered with climbing vines. Only windows, stone steps, and narrow pathways remain visible through the greenery. Reaching Hotuan takes several stages. From the mainland, the journey continues by ferry to the Shengsi Islands. From there, you travel across the island before entering the village's network of pedestrian paths. Stone alleyways and staircases connect the houses, descending the hillside toward the small harbor below. The entire layout follows the island's steep terrain. Over the years, the distance from the mainland and the difficulty of transportation led more and more residents to leave Hotuan. Vines gradually covered the abandoned buildings, yet the stone pathways remain in place, revealing how the entire village was once connected across the mountainside before it fell silent. Rain is not built on a single continuous piece of land. The village is spread across several small islands in the Lofoten archipelago. Narrow channels separate them. Bridges connect each section into one unified community. Red wooden houses cluster around the fishing harbors. Behind them, steep mountains rise almost directly from the shoreline. Flatland is extremely limited. As a result, most buildings stand on narrow strips of land along the bays. The E10 highway brings vehicles to Rain, but within the village, the roads repeatedly cross bridges, follow the shoreline, and connect one neighborhood to another. Before the bridge network was completed, boats were the primary way to travel between these settlements. During winter, strong winds and rough seas on the Norwegian Sea can interrupt boat travel. At those times, the bridges become the most reliable links between different parts of the village. Raini is not difficult to reach because it is completely cut off from the world. It is difficult to reach because the entire village is built across a landscape divided into many separate pieces by the sea. Deep in the rainforests of Papua, some Korowai communities still live in houses built high in the trees. Many of these homes stand between 20 and more than 30 meters above the ground. Their frames are constructed from wood, rattan, and palm leaves gathered from the surrounding forest. There are no roads connecting these settlements to the outside world. The journey usually begins in dugout canoes, traveling along the rivers. It then continues on foot for many hours, sometimes even days, through rainforest, swamps, and shallow streams. Within the settlements themselves, tree trunks carved with footholds serve as the only way to climb between the ground and the houses. The distance between groups of homes is often considerable. Dense forest blocks almost every line of sight. As a result, travel depends on trails that have existed for generations. For the Korowai people, the rainforest is not only where they live, it is also the network that connects one community to another. Edinburgh of the Seven Seas does not follow the rhythm of roads or flight schedules. The community is located on Tristan da Cunha, in the middle of the South Atlantic. There is no airport. There is no option to leave the island and return the same day. Every physical connection with the outside world begins at sea. Ships usually depart from South Africa. The voyage can take several days before reaching the island. When a ship arrives, cargo, mail, medical supplies, and passengers are all handled at the village's small harbour. The settlement occupies a narrow strip of land at the foot of Queen Mary's Peak. Homes, the school, the store, and the health centre are all concentrated within a small area. Getting around inside the village is not difficult, But to leave Tristan da Cunha, residents must wait for the next ship. Here, the distance to the outside world is measured by days at sea and by how many times ships are able to reach the island each year. Different roads, different landscapes, yet they all lead to the same story: the remarkable ability of people to adapt to nature. And that is what makes these villages so extraordinary. Places that almost seem too incredible to be real. Of all the places you've seen today, which one surprised you the most? And if you had the chance to experience one of them yourself, which would you choose? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoy journeys like this, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next adventure.